everybody. Just saying hi in the chat and waving. We've got such a fun day, such a fun session planned for you. Just a reminder to engage in the chat or in Q&A. We'll try to hold some time to ask Carrie some questions at the very end. I'm Haley. I'm just your host for today. I'm going to hand it over to the talent here very quickly as I let Carrie tell us a little bit more about what they're doing at Penn State. Carrie, if you'll just advance one slide for me. In case you're wondering who I am, although I don't think anyone is because I've been talking all day, I think my baseball card slide will show up in just a minute here. Yes, so I'm at Smith College.
We know you.
I was going to say everybody knows who I am, so I'm going to do this really quick. I'm at Smith College. I'm a member of the advisory council and part of your higher ed planning team. I'm also a Salesforce MVP and a co-host of the podcast. I am going to hand it over as quick as possible to Carrie because we can't possibly soak up enough knowledge from her. I just find her inspiring in general as a friend, but also as somebody I commonly go to whenever I have questions. So Carrie, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll get started.
Got it. Thanks. Oh, and ditto. Boy, this community is, as we all know, awfully amazing. So I'm Carrie Marcinkevage. I'm from Penn State University. I was at the business school for a long time, and I led the MBA program and a couple of other things. And I got so interested in CRM that I dove into it wholeheartedly and even got a PhD. So I'm embracing Dr. CRM, and I guess I have to because I did include one bit of research in the presentation. So I will own Dr. CRM for the moment. So what you see here on my baseball card slide is our latest endeavor really around enterprise CRM. We've got already a number of orgs out there, but we've really been diving into enterprise CRM. I will hold and I will tell you a little bit more about it as we go here. But this is our big next. I won't go through all of it, but Penn State University, it's pretty big, right? So I resonate with Frank Montoya in that there's lots of students, lots of potential users and use cases. So 90,000 students, 20,000 faculty and staff. There are 24 campuses, and that part is a little bit different from some other areas. 24 campuses across Pennsylvania that we work with. So there's an awful lot that we're trying to juggle and trying to pull together, and that informed a good bit of our strategy. All those constituents that we're touching, right? You can see, I call this the spaghetti picture. And this is what Peter Coffey talked about when he said someone can be an alum, a donor, a parent, a ticket holder, a recruiter, an employee, a participant, all at the same time, right? So this is, and we're all connected. And what we actually want is to multiply those relationships and make them deeper, simultaneous, lifelong. So this is what we're all really after, but it's about as messy as the diagram is, right? And so, of course, when you've got this many and this many connections, we, like everybody, have this many different systems, right? Lots of systems that are all together and all disconnected and trying to figure out what to do. We did a little bit of an assessment of this, and here are at least some of the ones that we came up with of what we're dealing with. Our goal has been to say, all right, we've got to get a handle on this, and we've got to do something to bring all this together for our poor constituents who have to navigate all this. So our history, enterprise CRM really started pre-COVID in the days PC, and it was a first RFP that really looked at technology, and it was really about functionality. What kind of things did we want to be able to do in what we were calling a CRM system? And that RFP effort was cut short in part by COVID, but also because it was really about functionality, but we had no strategy. So all of the technology platforms and products were saying, well, I understand what you want, but not what you want to do with it. Why do you want it? So in 2021, we launched a second RFP. This was kind of our do-over. And in this one, we brought together a large group who put together some use cases. We started with 15 and narrowed down to about 12 and said, what do you want to do? What can we do? And this is where I think Peter Coffey that said any system that tells you what to do and how to do it is a product, not a platform. And so we were looking for a platform. And in 2022, we awarded to Salesforce, and then we started coming up with an implementation partner pool. And we got a lovely idea from Kyla Farrell at Wisconsin around creating a pool of implementation partners. So we had a number of partners, and we expedite the process of all of the professional services agreements and all of that. And we selected the pool and selected from the pool those who would help us in that last box, the 2022 and forward. The first thing we did is our enterprise strategic planning. That's the very first project we undertook, and it set the stage for everything that you see after that. Our external org and our learner org, which are our two big orgs that we're standing up, and marketing and communications, engagement and automation, as well as data cloud. So that's a little bit of our history of how we got here, and it's important. It's been a journey, and there have been a lot of people involved. So what we did with enterprise strategic planning, that's the one where we spent a lot of time on this to really get our act together before we started any kind of implementation. So we started with a vision that we actually developed during that second RFP, and it's long, it's wordy. I think we've already said, okay, we need to work on it again. But I want to point the points that you see here: culture, process, and technology. Culture is such a big part of this because we're so used to not sharing data or living with what we have and not knowing that we could be doing anything else. So there's a lot that's really about culture and process before we get to the technology. And then the collaboration part. That's really what on in how we approached our phase 0 strategic planning. So strategic planning was 14 weeks long, and that's it. That's all we had. We were going to do this in 14 weeks, and we partnered with Huron Consulting to do our future planning. And of course, Huron was ready to come in. We were originally looking at doing it kind of the typical way that a consulting company would come in and do stakeholder interviews and draw up some findings and report back to us and all of that. And we decided we wanted to change that format entirely. And so instead we used an appreciative inquiry process and a much more collaborative, much more iterative process. It was extremely ambitious. I feel kind of bad for Huron because I'm not sure they knew what they were getting into when I said, hey, let's do it like this. But amazing work going through it with us and helping us out. We started with this very asset-based approach. I don't know about you, but we can all get lost in the details of what didn't work and what doesn't work and what we don't like. And this helped us really kind of leapfrog that and say, where are we going? We have such an amazing potential here for the whole university. What would it look like, and what could we do? So we framed it in that way, and we structured it as a series of workshops. So each of the workshops that were, there were 6 of them, each of the workshops had over 50 people attending it every time for every workshop, and workshops were at least 2 hours a piece. And in the end, we had over 95 people, nearly 100 people participating. We had a document around these 6 workshops and 5 areas of inquiry. And these were really, they landed in about a 70-page document of full strategy with over 300 comments and edits and participation by everyone. So the areas that we looked at were the typical ones that I'm sure that you've all talked about. We tried to pull it all together into this process. So we had a workshop about technology and architecture, and then we wrote down our findings and our recommendations from that workshop and started circulating that document. And then we had a funding model. So our findings and recommendations document was being generated from day one. So people participated both in the workshops and in looking at the strategy document and building it as we went. And that created a very, very fluid, immersive, activity-based and goal-based way of approaching this. And it allowed people to engage in the way they were most comfortable. Some people said, you know, I'm going to listen in the sessions and then I'm going to think about it, but I'm really going to participate through the document. And so all manner of learning and participation it accommodated. It was just a really good way for us to do it. The ones that I really want to point out are in the two areas here of organizational structure and staffing and change management, central local support model and boundary spanning. Those are the two that in a session I'm just going to mention a little bit about. Central local, we've seen lots of governance models. We've seen consolidated, federated, lots of different discussions about governance and how things are organized and architected. We called this our central local support model. And what we mean by that is it's a shared model of some central resources and some unit-based resources. That means our administrative users in both areas. And so how do we work all that? Aside from a really good RACI chart, we really wanted to take advantage of both from supporting it at an enterprise level, and then what you get supporting it at the unit level. And this was also a way to make sure that we got the buy-in of both the central areas and the unit areas. So really return on relationship for the whole engagement, the whole constituent is what we are looking for. And how do we lower the cost of entry into the enterprise? And how do we actually, how do we get this supported at the top, at the right level? And then at the unit level is absolutely the way that you get the most innovation, the most flexibility, and the most speed. So we call it the speed to the need, right? And how do we do both of those together? So we established some pretty good architecture around what does it look like to, what do we support at the enterprise, what do we support locally, and how do we collaborate on everything from our DevOps tools to the who's doing what and the overall organization of it. And then the other piece that I want to mention is organizational boundaries. And this is the part where I admit for a moment, I am drawing on the research. So when you think about all these areas, the central IT functions, the unit functions, even within the functions, it means that you've got lots of organizational boundaries. And I don't know if all universities are alike, but a lot of them that we talk about, those boundaries and those silos are pretty distinct. And so there are organizational boundary spanning objects and roles. And it turns out that CRM is actually a really good one. And these projects are great places to highlight how you can look for boundary spanning opportunities that fall into these kind of 4 areas. So the more you can get information flowing back and forth to a much more open architecture, the more you can create a really collaborative environment rather than competitive or, this is mine. I don't trust you. That's the next one, right? I want my information. I'm keeping it close to the vest. This is my data. These are my students. These are my contacts. The more you can open that up to see the student as belonging to the institution rather than any certain area. And the last one, this kindredness, the more that each of the units can see themselves as like others, the more you're likely to kind of break down those silos and reduce the barriers. In the research, it's called increasing organizational boundary permeability, right? The things that can go in and out. CRM, if you really think about these, right? There are so many ways to make information flow faster and better through CRM. It can be very collaborative. There are ways to see everything and ways to lock things down, but it's not all or nothing. And you can see a person is a person. It's the Horton Hears a Who. A person's a person no matter how small. And we all, for the betterment of the institution, are a part of that person's journey. So CRM technology can be an amazing boundary spanning tool in the toolbox of culture change. So, right. And then just following up on all the big lessons learned. So I already mentioned people, process, technology all together. design it as simply as possible while keeping that whole constituent in mind. With senior leadership support, we had that throughout in all of those individuals, the nearly 100. We had very strong senior leadership support, which also helped that funding model conversation. The resource levels that are both at the central level as well as the unit level, figuring out the technology to be what we call ambidextrous, right? So open to anything and integration with everything. So those are some of the highlights. And I think I would just wrap up with, in this overall discussion of our phase 0, here's what the group thought of it. This is from the nearly 100 people who were involved. There was a lot of learning, there was a lot of collaboration, and I think it really helped support the culture of what we wanted to create around CRM. So I will leave you with a couple of resources that'll be available, and there's my timer. So those resources and open up to questions that you might have.
You did so great, Carrie. I was trying so hard not to disrupt your flow because I was going to tell you we're getting like a little bit of stickiness. I'm wondering if maybe you just go off video if it might help. But I was like, I didn't want to interrupt you because you were in the moment.
Yep,
you know,
absolutely.
No, you did so good. I
Talk
always
fast as
learn.
possible. Here we go.
Yeah. I always learn so much from you. I have never heard the term ambidextrous, but I'm going to use it now. So I'm going to hopefully do that. I do want to make sure we answer a question that's in the Q&A from David. And I think David is at my alma mater, U of M, Michigan. So no big deal, go blue. So the question was, what level of administration access did you give users at the unit support level? Could they see Salesforce setup, for example?
Yes, right now, we are working in an environment where both have setup access. We are looking at what would that look like with advanced permission set access instead. But Salesforce didn't make, levels of admin exactly. It's all or nothing. So right now, in the spirit of having everybody engaged, that's the better way to go. And it's also we're talking about units who at Penn State, several of the big units have entirely separate IT organizations, right? So these are two IT organizations who had never worked closely together quite like that before. So we're doing this on an even footing right now of setup available to everybody. Not everyone in the end, but admin on both sides.
That's amazing. So I know you had a slide about resources. So one of my questions was just about like, where could somebody go if they wanted to learn more about appreciative inquiry? So can you just share your slide there? Yes, exactly. Yeah. One of those is from last year, HEDreamin23, right?
It is. Look at that. Yes.
Nice.
Yes, it's been a growing lesson learned kind of experience to do this. We kind of replicated some of the process in phase 0 that we did in the second RFP, so we got to learn and grow from it.
Oh, that's amazing. I think we have time for one last question. Let me see if we've got one. Oh, we do. A question from Doug. I'm just going to go ahead and approve that. So, do you feel the phase 0 was critical to the success of the project, or could these tasks have been wrapped into phase 1 of implementation?
I would say absolutely not wrapped into phase 1 because number one, it's really better to have had all of it architected and figured out before starting phase 1, because surely we would have gotten into phase 1, decided something, and then have to revisit it later when we had some other thing come up. That's reason 1. But reason 2 is the 100 people weren't all from just the phase 1 individuals and units. In fact, I'm going to try and go backwards if I can. Sorry if I'm making anybody seasick here, but so external org, development, alumni relations, and corporate engagement, right? That's kind of the phase 1. That's the first group that we were going live with. And the second one, though, you see Education Cloud, for World Campus and Graduate School. Well, they were all involved in phase 0, as were some other areas like other student affairs, undergraduate admissions, HR, and some other areas. So phase 0 was contributed to by the whole institution, not just those who were going first. And I think that made it, we feel like we're on a much more solid foundation because we did it with everybody.
I love that. We are about to do something very similar, and I think that's just such a key part, is getting everybody into the space, right, and doing it all at the same time. So, Carrie, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. I'm not joking. I feel like I come away with like pages of notes every time I talk with you. Just thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and being so great. If anybody has any questions about this, I would definitely recommend watching the other recording from last year, which I was also lucky enough to be on for that. We'll be sharing the YouTube channel details, where this will also be towards the end of our closing session, which is coming up next.
Perfect.
Thanks, Carrie.
I'd love to learn from others. Thanks,
Oh,
everyone.
yes. Oh, yes. Thank you so much. And to everybody who's still here with us, we'll be starting the closing celebration in just about 4 minutes. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.